Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady. Let's talk about food. We're Iowans and we love food. But how adventurous are we? Really, how adventurous are we? That's what we're going to talk about today in the delicate line that chefs have to walk. We're going to talk about a lot of things: sustainability, food quality, and maybe even our guests' brush with superstardom. We're going to talk about that. I actually didn't even know that until I was researching this gentleman who's in the studio right now, Andy Schumacher, the chef and owner of Cobble Hill in Cedar Rapids. Thanks for coming in the studio.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Can we say you were almost a Food Network star?
we can say that. We can say that.
We'll get into that later, but there's a really funny story. It's over a decade ago now.
Many moons, yes.
And This is where you actually met Guy Fieri. You guys were friends before he became Guy Fieri.
That's true.
We're going to cover that too. The most important question is the hair real? Nobody believes the hair is real. But anyway, so the reason you're in here actually is because when my wife and I travel, we always make sure to hit James Beard nominees or finalists or award winners. Like, this is our travel hack. And she's a travel person. She's like, don't give out all my secrets. Sorry, honey. But James Beard, for those that don't know, is legit. I'm going to let you describe it. But if someone has a James Beard stamp on their website, it's probably a pretty safe bet. It's going to be good food quality. Can you just give us a really, really broad rundown on what James Beard is and how you won? I think you're a semifinalist now.
Well, James Beard is a foundation. I think they're based out in New York, and they're around to recognize culinary people in the industry and around the country. I think they started in like the early 90s. I'm not exactly sure, but idea. I think it was around that time. But growing up for me, in terms of training for a chef, it was definitely something that was kind of like the Oscars of the food world for chefs in the United States. At that point, Michelin wasn't in the United States, and so
really,
they didn't come till much later. And so that was kind of like the creme de la creme of it, and everyone wanted to be involved with that, and that was kind of what you aspired for, which is really it's really cool to be nominated for it.
Yeah, I was telling you before we started recording that I basically put James Beard and Michelin essentially on the same platform.
Yeah.
Michelin, you're going to have the crazy experience, the table brushing, the people that serve the dishes at exactly the same time, the reveal. It's very precise, almost like a symphony.
Yeah.
But a James Beard is more like a jazz combo. Like the food quality, there's still talent. It's just different. It's just not like, if you're into the polish, which we are from time to time, great. But if you're not, it's probably not a big deal. I've had Michelin dishes that are worse than James Beard dishes and vice versa. So if you're hitting either, it's probably a safe bet. So semifinalist now, but 10 years ago was actually your first nomination, or excuse me, in 2015, over 10 years ago.
Yeah, yes.
No, that's about 10 years ago. So how did you get on the semifinalist list, and what was different now? Why did it take those idiots 10 years? Come on, guys.
Well, that's a good question. There's always been a bit of mystique and mystery around that for me. I'm not exactly clear how I get on the list. I know they have something on their website that kind of talks a little bit about there's some regional judges and committees and things and people who are in your area, because they do generate different regional awards. So, I'm competing in the Midwest, which has a handful of states, and then there's different regions for different awards. So to answer your question, I'm not exactly sure. It was a surprise back then. A funny story is, both times I got on the list, I didn't even know. I was informed.
Oh, really?
Informed by a friend or a colleague.
Hey, good job. What?
Yeah, yeah. This one was particularly surprising because, like, kind of as you said, like the first one was a couple years after we had opened, and I was fresh into the experience of owning my own place and very eager, and so I think I was a lot more focused on that. And this one. I've kind of evolved a little bit more and matured in terms of how I see the business and, my goals and things for what I'm trying to do and achieve with my employees and my community. And I just thought it kind of had passed me by. I didn't even really consider it much. Not that I had anything against it, just wasn't really a thought. And so to be re-recognized 10 years later feels pretty cool, and
yeah, for sure,
feels different in a way too.
So you're Iowa grad, Iowa guy.
Yeah, Iowa guy.
You and your wife, I think,
yes,
right?
Correct.
Probably met at the University of Iowa. I would
sure
guess.
Did. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Went to Brooklyn, and then eventually we brought you back.
Yes.
Somehow Iowa. Yeah.
I like Iowa. Yeah. I love Iowa.
So. What's different, though, because you worked in restaurants in Brooklyn,
mm-hmm.
What's different about Iowa, a lot of people get this wrong, by the way. They're like, oh, Iowa, they just don't have the palate. Not true at all. Not even remotely true.
Yeah.
The difference is Iowa doesn't have the population. And so when you have bigger populations, you can go more niche, you can experiment, you can do crazy stuff on a plate
mm-hmm.
and probably find an audience for it.
Correct.
In Iowa, you can't do that. There's not the population. So you do have to go a little bit more broad. Does that really push you as a chef? Because it's plate artistry.
Right.
You really want to push the boundaries of food.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you push too far, you're going to alienate your entire audience.
Yeah.
So is that challenging?
Well, so when we first opened, that was a big, exactly what you just articulated, was a big consideration for us, because we had just moved back from that market and we were experiencing more of that diversity in food and different types of cuisines. And, especially in Cedar Rapids, I mean, I'm sure Des Moines is even a little bit better, but the population in Cedar Rapids is probably half of Des Moines.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're taking, that as down by a factor of 1 that way. So I think that when we first opened, it was a challenge because we weren't offering, a salad or, with your entree. We weren't offering any, like, we don't have, any like Jack Daniels are kind of like common,
Right.
So we do a lot of niche things. And the food was also kind of a little bit niche. We were getting ingredients in and things in that were unfamiliar to people. So there was some anxiety around that for us.
Mm-hmm.
We were worried how that was going to be received. I think part of our success is that, although we did execute the food well and we gained the trust of the community, my wife, Carrie, she runs the front of the house. And
just kind of the business end.
Yeah. And her expertise with hospitality and service and, curating the wine list and running that really kind of like is the second half of the equation that really, I think, was helpful for us to be able to like say, hey, we're going to do it our way and we're going to do the food we want to do without getting too crazy, obviously. But, we also push the boundaries, and kind of one of the coolest compliments you can get from someone is if they come in and say, hey, I've never liked X, but I had it here and it changed my mind on how I perceive it and I really like it. And that's like super cool because someone's trusting you and you're delivering on a good experience and a good flavor for them.
That is really cool. I'm glad you brought up service and focus on service. There is, as you well know, someone's good or bad service translates to the food they taste. So they have bad service, they have a front desk or front of office person, front of house person that they don't like or treats them disrespectfully, they're going to taste worse food.
100% true. That's like a really good point, actually.
It's it's a sign for the nerds, for all the nerds out there. It's called sensation transference. You can look it up, but basically your experience with design and design experience translates to the food quality, the wine quality, yada yada yada. Anyway, that being said, I feel like there is a big gap and a huge problem in service these days.
Mm-hmm.
I call restaurants. I did this when I was visiting Memphis. I went to a James Beard nominee or a winner maybe. And I tried to book through Resi or Talk or something. And they're like, there are all these hoops. You need to do a down payment. Okay, that's, okay, fine. Certain places, whatever. But that was too difficult. I didn't want to do a down payment. I've never been there before. I tried to call. And then they had an AI thing that would answer, and they're like taking all my notes. Disaster. Finally, then at the end, they're like, okay, your reservation's not confirmed. We'll call you. And then, of course, they call me and start asking me the same questions. And I'm like, do any of you want money?
Right.
And so how, like, service just across the board, I know it's hard to find great help. Service is really, really tough. Mm-hmm. Has this been tough for you? Like, have you been, like, is this a challenge to continually every darn day offer good service to people?
I think that something that really sets us apart is that the culture that Carrie and I have created with the restaurant. We're actually entering our 13th year right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been around a long time, and we have really created a culture at Cobble Hill that allows people to come work there, feel like they're part of something bigger, feel like they're part of a family, and we create an experience for our guests. We have relationships with our purveyors and our farmers. We're mentoring our employees. And so all these things kind of coming together, I think is what really allows us to, it's like sometimes, and it's cool too, because after a certain amount of time, this culture, this engine ethos that we created has a life of its own to a certain extent. Now we're still there, obviously, and we're still guiding, but like you can see it permeate in new people who are hired and how their like mentality will shift. Or we'll have someone say, oh, this person's applying, I wouldn't hire them. They maybe weren't great at this restaurant. And we're like, okay, well, we're not that restaurant, we're different. And people have different experiences. They feel different ways. And if they're treated different ways, they perform differently as well. And so we've had people who become great employees who maybe weren't a good fit at another place, and that's all based on the context of their experience.
What you're saying is the way you're treated by an employee is often the way they were treated by their boss.
Absolutely.
And there are exceptions. People have bad days. People lose a loved one. People are, have an abusive relationship, something. But generally, if someone's treating you like crap, have a little patience, because it probably means they have a stupid boss. So I want to get into, you mentioned the purveyors and farmers you worked with, and something that you guys are really passionate about is food quality.
Absolutely.
And this is like better, you call it, your vision is about a better food system. Mm-hmm. And this is something, when we don't do, we're not doing politics, but this is something that's definitely been in the news recently because of the RFK stuff. Now we're talking about it.
Yeah.
So how has this news and this news cycle shifted your operation? Are you getting different questions? Are you changing how you structure the kitchen, the farmers you work with? How has this changed what you guys do, or how will it change what you do?
I don't think it'll change it in any way. This is something that we've been living and doing for a decade, and I think that is just kind of already baked into the cake for us. It ultimately ultimate motivation for it is that, our main goal is to try to create the best experience for our guests and the best experience for our community. People who are passionate about what they're doing in terms of like a farmer, a purveyor, or someone who's raising animals, building those relationships gives you an edge over another place, because you are able to have an intimate relationship with that producer and curate maybe a exact product that you want, or give direct feedback to someone on what they're doing and what they're growing, or how the animal is being raised or what they're being fed. All those kinds of things that you can't get just from ordering from, a large corporation or something. So we try to, and I'm not trying to say we never order anything from a larger purveyor, because in Iowa you have to.
You have to.
But we definitely put tons of work and energy, and in the height of, summer, almost all of our produce is local. It takes a lot more work also to do that. Yeah.
I mean, it does, because you have to be the supply chain.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have one organization sourcing it all for you. Mm-hmm. Has that, and that was my next question, is in Iowa, is that a challenge? Because, we are the food capital, one of the food capitals, but not for everything. We have a lot of pork access, probably beef, corn, but we don't have everything. That's the beauty of this country and the diversity of all the growing regions. Yeah. We don't have everything here. So like you said, in summer, it's easier to find some stuff, but in Iowa, has that been a challenge for you to source what you need?
It's definitely a challenge. I think the challenge then becomes, what are you going to do with the things you can get? And so I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people, because if you don't have the the background experience or training in your field or your craft of cooking, it's a lot more difficult to say, well, hey, this is all we had crappy weather all June, so you're not going to get all these things that we talked about we were going to get in February. So now, but I do have this. And so you need to be able to say, hey, like, what can I make with this? So it's kind of the inverse of like sometimes having an idea for a dish and you wanting to use a certain amount of things. But if you flip that, on its head and it's like, now here are the things I have, what can I make with it? And so talking with farmers and producers and who are hey, there are other restaurants we can sell to. We want to expand. That's a big challenge for a lot of people is like, it's difficult and challenging for operators to have the anxiety to be like, well, I have this menu. This is my menu. And so that's another thing where like, you can only really get that through just experience and training. And you get to do a point where you're like, that's just your paradigm is I'm improvising with things and creating stuff all the time. No. That's just how it is.
As an award-winning chef in Iowa, then, do you have to train your patrons to be more adaptable and basically bring them on the journey with you? That, hey, because it was a rainier season in June, we're making this dish. Or, hey, because May was colder, we're making these dishes. Yeah. Do you train them and do you bring them along on that experience with you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's some strategies too. Like, we'll create a dish around maybe a really nice piece of pork that's more available all year long. But the things that we're putting with it are the things that are maybe a little bit more diversified or need to be a little bit more adaptable. But maybe the perception to the guest is that, oh, this is a cool pork entree. And we also say this is the stuff that we get available right now. And I think that also is enchanting for people to be like, hey, this is what we're getting right now from this person. And then it kind of also gives them a little bit of buy-in to be like, well, that's really cool. Like, you guys are just kind of playing jazz and doing things with things that you have. And it opens them up to trying something new.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Personally?
Yeah. As a guest, you mean, as a person, going and experiencing something new.
Yeah. I mean, personally, this is just me, of course. I know I don't speak for everyone, but personally, I don't really want to pick my menu options.
Yeah.
I want to go in there and have the chef tell me what I'm eating.
Yeah.
Like, and maybe some people probably think that sounds nuts, but that is fun. I don't want to pick through crap. And because I usually ask, be honest, what are the stars here and what's the filler?
Right.
What are the ones that you're kind of serving up because people want them? What are the ones you're really proud about? And it's kind of hard to get that answer sometimes.
Totally. Absolutely.
When you talk about sustainability, are you guys like non-GMO, only grass-fed, no seed oils? Do you like no processed sugars? Where are you? And that's hard, by the way, to go full that way. We do that in our kitchen at our house. It's darn hard to do for just two of us.
Yeah.
How do you look at kind of the food quality scenario in Cobble Hill?
So in terms of sustainability, we're not going to the nth degree of eliminating like all those things, because we also like, hey, we have a dessert program and a pastry program, and we're doing, pastries and things that require some of that stuff. I think more of the scope for us is like, how can we build relationships with people who are growing and raising animals and bring that as a forefront and a real, another thing too is like, I think it's fashionable too for restaurants to say, hey, we use local. It's a very, it's a buzzword, but like sometimes if you dig a little bit deeper, you maybe realize they're not doing all that they can. And so we've just completely embraced this to say, hey, we're going to sit down in January with one of our farmers and plan what we're going to grow all year.
Wow.
We're going to go visit this guy's lamb farm and see the lambs he's raising and the pigs he's raising. And so we do those things and we make those real connections. And like I said, it's a lot of work, but it's super rewarding. And, it comes out as the added benefit is you're usually buying at superior product anyway, which is kind of what you want, but so you get it on both sides.
As Iowa restaurant owners seek to localize their food, and as Iowa farmers seek to localize the supply, which is more sustainable, by the way, less trucks going all over the country, do we see a whole different model where farmers and restaurant owners are like collaborating more often, kind of what you described? Do we see this? And do we see maybe this totally new dynamic on how like farm to table is almost a very literal, very direct thing here in Iowa?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that it all kind of boils down to that. From my experience, is like that needs to just happen on such a micro level. Like you just have to make a decision to say, I'm gonna, because they're everywhere too. There's people who are passionate or hey, I have a farm here. Or I'm deciding to raise ducks or what. I mean, they're all over Cedar Rapids. I'm sure they're all over Des Moines. They exist. You got to put a little work in to find them, but they want to be connected with chefs. They want to sell things, and so that's just it's there for the taking. But I do think that that's something that just has to happen on a super micro level.
Does that also combat rising food costs by working local, cutting out distributors that are like bringing something from Iowa, bringing it to a national warehouse, then bringing it back? Does this kind of offset some of the rising costs we're seeing in food, or is it kind of a wash?
You know, I haven't paid super close attention to that aspect of it, so I don't know. I think I would say in general that we're normally paying a little bit of a premium anyway, because we're paying someone who's doing all this extra work themselves, and it's not commoditized already. So probably marginally maybe, but not exactly pulse on that, you know?
Yeah. Have you seen rising food costs across the board, though?
Definitely.
Yeah. So even here in Iowa, you're seeing rising food costs.
Absolutely.
And is that putting a lot of pressure on your operation? Because obviously patrons never want to pay more money.
Yeah.
I mean, generally, no one wants to pay more money, you know?
Yeah. I think, you know, it's yes. The answer to your question is yes. And we have had to, you know, make some incremental increases in some menu pricing. We've definitely tried to be conservative about it and be like transparent and honest with it. I think part of an advantage for us is that since we have been around for 12 years, you know, we're not a new restaurant that's kind of still scrapping to get over the hump. And so it puts us in a little different position to kind of like be able to like, you know, be a little more incremental with some of that stuff, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Okay. So we got to talk about this.
Okay.
Because not until I think it was yesterday I started researching this, I realized you kind of had your brush a few times in the national spotlight, which, by the way, anybody watching online, Andy keeps like looking into the camera for certain comments, and most guests never do that.
It's the intuition. I don't know.
I mean, that's pretty funny because, you know, it's a really good way of bringing the audience into the conversation. They're very much a part of it, and some guests kind of forget that.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting watching you. Like,
I didn't even notice I'm doing that.
Yeah, you didn't even notice?
No.
It's so funny. I guess this is what, you know, Food Network stars, or I don't know what we call you, a second tier Food Network
I'd say second tier at this point, yeah.
I didn't even know Guy Fieri. He's, you know, no stranger to Iowa. He's been here a few times.
Absolutely.
I didn't know you guys were friends, and I guess I didn't even make the connection that you guys were both season 2? Same season?
2, yeah.
Season
2005.
2005 of Iowa Food Network start. That's where he got his whole start? Is this correct?
Yeah, so that was his kickoff point. I can recall the moment I walked in the room and met him for the first time. And so, yes, he, like, because people, to answer a question that you may ask, because a lot of people ask
get that in the microphone. We want to make sure to hear this one. Go ahead and pivot that towards yourself a little bit.
People, you know, are often like, you know, how was when you first met him and stuff, and you know, he was exactly the same the day I met him that he was, and you know, is now. So he's authentic.
Really?
Sure.
So
yeah,
that was him.
Absolutely.
He didn't change much.
No.
Did you ever get a peek in the dressing room when he was putting on that hair?
No, I didn't. That's funny. He probably does that in private, I suppose.
We want to know. Everyone wants to know, is it real? Because that is crazy hair.
It is
It's
crazy.
like perfectly pointed and frosted or whatever.
I'm sure he's perfected it over the 20 years. You know, maybe it was a little more like, I don't remember. I remember he had it. I don't remember if it's exactly the same, but like, that's his signature now. He's probably got it dialed in.
It is. It almost looks like he was one of the forgotten members of the Backstreet Boys. You know what I mean? That's so funny. But yeah, he's no stranger to Iowa. And so even, I don't know, it was maybe a few years ago, you went back down to California to shoot for one of his shows.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about this crazy experience? Like, how does someone get connected to this And why did he invite you back to do this grocery show in California? What is this? What is this stuff?
So it started. We were both selected to, like you said, be on this show called the Next Food Network Star, where they were just trying to find someone who was going to be the next Food Network star, have a show on the Food Network. And it was like one of those elimination shows, and he went on to win that, and that was like his spring off to the fame he has. So fast forward, I think it was 10 years, because I think we filmed the grocery show in 2016, and he had an idea to, hey, let me invite back all the people who originally were on the show together with me when we were first competing, and they can compete on my grocery show while, he hosts it. And so that was the impetus for that, and went back for that and won that show. And, had a great time. I ended up actually going back to his house afterwards. And then he was opening a restaurant in Las Vegas that weekend. So I flew with him and his crew to Las Vegas and spent a few days with him, because I hadn't seen him in a long time. Yeah. But it was cool. But it was a fun experience. So we text, every once in a while. We got pretty silly and had a good, fun relationship, inside jokes and stuff from going through the show together. But yeah, he's a cool dude.
So the Food Network stuff, does that help get patrons in the door, do you think? Because it's kind of a cool little rubber stamp on the restaurant. Yeah. Do you think that that sends some people in? They're curious. They like,
yeah, I think so. I think when it happens, especially when we were still open when the grocery games came out, and so having kind of like those like little pushes definitely get some new people in. I don't think I lean on it as much as some people tell me I should. I didn't really market it that heavily, but I think it helps. Yeah, I definitely do. But it's also it's a different. Some people are coming from a much different experience, and so it's a little bit of a mix. But yeah,
what we're seeing on shows like that, is that all real, or is it pretty much contrived?
Pretty real.
Pretty real?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
So I actually was on Chopped 2 years ago.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that wasn't.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I missed that one.
They had like a little.
Shame on my research department.
But that one was uber real. That was crazy, because that one you get like 30 minutes to do your first round, and then I think it was 45 for the next 2 rounds. And when I was on the grocery game show, it was a little bit more like we were all kind of friends and stuff. So Guy was like, "Hey, you guys ready?" And we were like, "Oh," and he's like, "I'm just going to give you an extra 5 minutes." And so I went into Chopped kind of like, they'll probably do this, because they also have to make the show, right? Like, yeah. And they can't, if everyone's not done, they can't just be like, "Well, no one finished." Like, you never see that.
That's true.
Right?
That's a great point.
So logically, I was like, maybe they will, but they didn't.
They just off to the races.
It was like,
right
you
away.
have a half hour. And thankfully, like before I was on that, my wife and kids did like a practice session at the restaurant.
Oh, smart.
Where they like brought here's a mystery basket, and I like ran around and got like the real feel of how this is going to feel for a half hour. Because it goes by fast.
Dude, like we cook a lot. We cook every meal at home, almost every meal. We rarely go out anymore. We cook all from scratch, from home. Yeah. We don't use mixes. And half an hour just making 2 dishes for us is tough sometimes.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of time.
No.
Like that's where Rachel Ray, like the basically the home cook, made her fame for 30-minute meals, because that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So half an hour is tough.
It is tough.
Last question before you go. Why Brooklyn? Mm-hmm. Why come back to Iowa?
I went to Brooklyn to go to culinary school. So me and my wife met at the University of Iowa. I was actually going to go to medical school. I have a degree in biology, and got into cooking as a hobby while I was getting prepared for that after undergrad. And it just kind of shifted. And so we said, let's move out to New York together and go to culinary school, and lived out there for 4 years, had our first child out there, and got pregnant with our second child. And so we were kind of like, it's tough living in New York City, you know. It's great if you're a young professional. It's expensive, and growing up in Iowa, you're just also used to a different lifestyle. It's slower, a little more peaceful,
not as expensive.
Not as expensive, And so all our family was back here. And so we were like, hey, we want to open a restaurant eventually. So let's move back and make it go with this.
Yeah, very interesting. I guess the last question, the burning question I have about TV chefs. And you're the closest I have to ask this question to, and you know a few of them.
Okay.
How do they do the cross-contamination thing? I swear I see like TV chefs touch raw meat or something, and then they're just like, towel, it's all good, and they just go touch stuff. I'm like, are they just cutting the fact that I'm washing my hands like all the time? I even when I do seasoning steaks, I like season my steaks, you have to touch them. I rotate them around, I wash hands, I go back. How do chefs, because you have culinary experience, you're formally trained.
Yeah.
How are chefs not cross-contaminating all the time when they're touching raw meat?
I don't know. They must have some cut scenes or something.
Oh, that's what they're doing? They're just cheating?
They're pausing and swapping everything out.
You guys are cheaters.
So that's why they're getting it done in a half hour.
Yeah, there you go. Screw all you guys and your cheating and jump cuts. Andy Schumacher, the chef and owner of Cobble Hill in Cedar Rapids. If people want to book a reservation, they want to find more information about you, how do they do that?
We have, they can book a reservation on our website, cobblehillrestaurant.com. We also have our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram where we post a lot of our dishes and things we're doing back in the kitchen at the same handle, Cobble Hill Restaurant. So come visit us if you're in the area, and we'd love to take care of you.
We will absolutely be visiting next time we're in Cedar Rapids. My wife and I are really excited about it. Andy Schumacher, Cobble Hill. Thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.